Blue and red lights flooded the quiet entrance of Mapleton Oaks, turning its perfect white fences into a crime scene. I stood beside my black sedan, hands raised every neighbor staring from their driveways in stunned silence. At the center of it all was Emma Johnson, our proud HOA president, red blazer pearl earrings, and a trembling hand clutching a small plastic bag of white powder. "There it is," she shouted. "I told you he was hiding something." The deputy beside her nodded, already reaching for his cuffs. I stayed calm, eyes locked on hers. She wanted humiliation, not justice. So I reached into my jacket, pulled out my badge, and flipped it toward the flashing lights. Director, Drug Enforcement Administration. The world seemed to stop. Emma's confident smile vanished, her knees buckled, and she collapsed right there on the pavement. Before we dive into this unbelievable story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is there in the comments below. And if you love stories where justice strikes back against HOA corruption, make sure to subscribe. You won't want to miss what happens next. When Emma Johnson woke up that morning, she already had a plan. She'd been watching my house for weeks, counting how long my grass grew, how many times I parked outside the visitor zone, even which garbage bin I used on Tuesdays. That's how life worked inside Mapleton Oaks, the kind of suburban community that looked perfect in photos and rotten underneath. It was the kind of place where people smiled at you during morning walks, but filed complaints the second you turned your back, where property values meant more than human decency, and Emma Johnson ruled it all like a self-appointed mayor. I'd been in this neighborhood for exactly 57 days, long enough to learn that the HOA rules weren't rules at all, they were weapons. That afternoon, I was driving home from my mother's physical therapy appointment. The sun was setting behind the tall oak trees, throwing long shadows across the perfect driveways. As I slowed near the security gate, 2 HOA volunteers stepped into the lane, holding bright orange vests and clipboards. Behind them stood Emma, lips pressed tight, sunglasses, gleaming smile sharp as a blade. "Mr. Miller," she called out sweetly, "we've had some reports about a suspicious smell coming from your car. HOA policy allows random inspections for community safety. I knew it was nonsense, but I played along. Safety, huh? From what fresh air?" Her fake smile didn't even flinch. "Please step out of the vehicle." The 2 volunteers looked uneasy. One of them, a young man with nervous hands, whispered, "Do we really need to?" "Yes, we do," Emma cut him off. "Mapleton Oaks takes drug use very seriously." I got out slowly, leaving the door open. She gestured for the younger man to search the trunk. He hesitated, but she hissed, "Go ahead." I stood quietly, my phone recording in my pocket, watching Emma's every move reflected in my side mirror. She wasn't looking at the trunk, she was focused on the passenger seat. Then I saw it, that tiny, calculated motion. Her manicured hand reached into her red purse, pulling out a folded napkin. Inside it was a small, clear plastic bag. I almost laughed. She was really doing it. She leaned in, pretending to adjust my glove compartment. When she turned back, her face lit up in triumph. "Oh my goodness," she cried, holding the bag up like a trophy. "Look what I just found." The young man stepped back in shock. "Wait, where did—" Emma raised her voice to drown him out. "This is evidence of possession. Someone call the sheriff's department." By now, a few neighbors had wandered out. Phones pointed at me. Someone gasped. Someone whispered. I knew he looked too calm to be normal. I stood there silent, watching the performance unfold. 5 minutes later, a patrol car rolled up. Deputy Raymond Jackson, the same man Emma invited to every HOA barbecue. He greeted her by first name before even looking at me. "Evening, Emma." "What seems to be the problem?" "Caught him red-handed," she said proudly. "Bag of cocaine right there in his car." Jackson whistled, took the bag, and looked at me with mock sympathy. "That's a felony amount, sir." "Is it?" I asked quietly. He nodded. "You have the right to remain silent." That's when I pulled out my wallet. I didn't rush. I didn't raise my voice. I simply held it open so the light caught the gold emblem inside. "Robert Miller," I said evenly. "Director, Drug Enforcement Administration." The air went still. The young volunteer nearly dropped his clipboard. Jackson's smirk vanished. Emma froze mid-blink. "That bag," I continued, "matches packaging used in DEA evidence rooms. And unless one of you has federal authorization to handle it, you're all in violation of multiple criminal statutes." For a long second, no one spoke. Then Emma's knees gave way. She stumbled, her purse spilling across the asphalt, gasping, "No, no, this can't be," before collapsing completely. The deputy caught her by reflex, stammering she fainted. "Then you'd better call for medical assistance," I replied calmly. "And while you're at it, keep that evidence sealed. My team will want to verify its origin." The crowd of neighbors had turned into silent statues. The same people who once whispered behind their hedges now looked terrified to breathe. I stepped closer to the deputy. Officer Jackson, I said I suggest you keep your hands off that bag until a federal unit arrives. Tampering with DEA evidence carries 20 years minimum. He nodded stiffly. Yes, sir. Emma was carried to the curb pale as paper, muttering something about misunderstanding and community watch. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed a single coded message from my operations team. Ready on your signal. They'd been stationed less than a mile away monitoring the situation from the start. Because I hadn't moved here by accident. Mapleton Oaks wasn't just another neighborhood. It was one of 6 communities under federal suspicion for funneling confiscated narcotics through civil enforcement fees. In other words, someone was using HOAs as a front to recycle drugs back into the system. I had come here undercover under the name Robert Miller to confirm it, and thanks to Emma Johnson's arrogance, I had all the proof I needed. As the ambulance pulled up, the flashing lights washed over the spotless lawns, perfect little boxes hiding rot beneath the soil. I gave the signal. Within minutes, 2 unmarked SUVs turned the corner. My agents stepped out, badges ready. Secure the evidence I ordered, and collect the surveillance feeds from the gatehouse. One agent whispered, Sir, do you want us to detain the HOA president? I looked at Emma, still trembling, pretending to be dizzy. No, I said. Not yet. Let her think she's still in control. People like her always talk when they believe they can still win. The deputy swallowed hard. Director? You mean this is federal now? It's been federal since the moment she touched that bag, I answered. You might want to call your supervisor. He didn't move. I turned to him again. Now deputy. The bystanders started whispering nervously. One neighbor muttered, I told you that HOA was going too far. Another whispered, they framed others before too. It was spreading. The truth always does once fear changes sides. As the paramedics loaded Emma into the ambulance, she caught my gaze. Her lips moved silently, but I could read it. You'll regret this. I gave a small smile. We'll see. When the ambulance drove away, I stood alone under the flashing lights. The evidence bag was sealed, labeled, and logged. The neighborhood had gone dead silent. Even the crickets seemed to hold their breath. In one evening, the self-proclaimed queen of Mapleton Oaks had fallen, and the walls of her perfect kingdom were about to crack wide open. But I knew better than to celebrate. Because in every case like this, the real danger starts after the first arrest. And I could already feel it. The eyes watching me from behind drawn curtains, the whispers forming in group chats, the silent engines idling on nearby streets. Emma Johnson wasn't working alone. And tonight had just lit the fuse that would burn through the entire HOA. The next morning, Mapleton Oaks looked like nothing had happened. The lawns were freshly watered, the mailboxes gleamed in the sun, and the sound of sprinklers replaced the echo of sirens from the night before. But beneath the perfect suburban calm, I could feel it, the quiet panic spreading behind closed doors. When I stepped outside to collect my mail, curtains twitched. Neighbors who used to wave now turned away. Someone had taped a note to my mailbox. We don't want trouble here. Leave. Trouble, I almost laughed. Trouble was already here, they just didn't know how deep it went. Inside my kitchen, the coffee pot hissed softly as I reviewed the case files my team had sent overnight. The preliminary lab report confirmed my suspicion. The bag Emma Johnson had found in my car contained cocaine from a federal evidence batch seized in 2019. Same serial markings, same purity. That meant one thing. Someone inside law enforcement was stealing from evidence lockers and distributing through civilian channels, and Emma's HOA was one of them. At 9:00 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was Agent Cole, my second in command. Director, we tracked the HOA's financials, he said. Over the past 18 months, they've issued more than 67 maintenance fines, exceeding $5,000 each. I frowned. 67 fines. That's more than most people's annual HOA dues. Exactly. And the payments don't go to the community account. They're routed through a shell corporation called Maple Development Group, owned by a law firm in Jackson. And the law firm, I asked, connected to a deputy county prosecutor who happens to be married to the HOA's attorney. Of course. It was never just about petty power or lawn heights. It was a business corruption wrapped in a picket fence. Before I could respond, a knock came at the door. Through the peephole, I saw Emma Johnson, standing there wearing oversized sunglasses, clutching a folder like nothing had happened. The audacity almost made me smile. I opened the door. Morning, Mrs. Johnson. You look recovered. Her voice quivered slightly, though she tried to keep it firm. I came to apologize for yesterday's misunderstanding. Is that what we're calling it now? She forced a laugh. Oh, come on, Mr. Miller. Everyone overreacted. It was a mistake. You know how rumors start. I do, I said. They usually start when someone plants evidence in a federal agent's car. Her smile faltered. You're really with the DEA. I leaned against the doorframe. Would you like to see the badge again? She quickly waved her hand. No need. Listen, this whole thing's gotten out of hand. Maybe we can clear it up quietly. Without the feds crawling all over our community. There it was, the plea wrapped in arrogance. The same tone I'd heard from corrupt officials and drug brokers for years. I tilted my head. Why would you care if the feds looked at your community, Mrs. Johnson? Her jaw tightened. Because it makes us look bad. Property values drop when the DEA starts sniffing around, or when cocaine shows up at the front gate. She blinked, searching for her next lie, then exhaled through her nose. You think you're helping, but you're tearing apart something beautiful. We've built order here, a safe neighborhood, clean streets, good people. Good people don't frame their neighbors, I interrupted. Her face hardened, the mask slipping. Be careful, Mr. Miller. You don't know how things work here. Oh, I think I do, I said softly. Better than you ever imagined. She left without another word, heels clicking sharply down my driveway. I watched her turn the corner and vanish behind her manicured hedges. 2 hours later, I met Agent Cole and forensic tech Maria Ortega in the back room of a small cafe just outside the gates. Maria slid a folder across the table. We analyzed the HOA's digital communications. You were right, they're coordinating with someone inside the sheriff's department, Cole added. They call it the Clean Streets Project. It's supposed to be a community safety initiative, but the group chat reads like a criminal playbook. I opened the file. Dozens of messages, photos of vehicles, addresses of problem homeowners, and phrases like target locked, seed drop successful, and case closed. Seeds, I muttered. They call the planted bags seeds. Maria nodded grimly. And the deputy they keep referencing, it's Raymond Jackson. The same one from last night. So Emma's performance wasn't spontaneous. It was part of a system, a production line of false charges and easy convictions. And the profits flowed through HOA fines, property seizures, and county court fees. Bring Jackson in for questioning, Cole asked. Not yet, I said. Let's follow the money first. People like him panic when their accounts start freezing. That evening, I drove through Mapleton Oaks again. The sun dipped low golden light catching on the windows. Kids played basketball, sprinklers ticked rhythmically, but the peace felt artificial, like a movie set. As I turned down Sycamore Drive, a black SUV idled at the corner. No license plate tinted windows. It didn't move as I passed, but I could feel eyes on me. By the time I reached my driveway, the SUV was gone. Inside, my landline rang an anonymous call. A distorted male voice spoke. Back off, director. This isn't your jurisdiction. You want peace. Leave the neighborhood alone. Then the line went dead. I stared at the silent receiver for a long moment, then smiled faintly. They were scared. Good. I pulled up the gatehouse footage from the previous night. The system had 6 cameras. One of them caught something interesting. Right before Emma's inspection, Deputy Jackson's patrol car had parked just out of frame. He'd handed her something through the window, a small napkin-shaped packet. Evidence exchange. I forwarded it to my team with one message. Issue the federal subpoena. We're pulling their communications. Later that night, while reviewing more financial data, I received an email from a hidden sender. The subject line read, "You don't understand what you're dealing with." Attached was a photo, grainy but clear enough. It was my car parked outside the cafe earlier that day. Someone had drawn a red X over it. The message below was short, "You're next." I locked the doors, checked the perimeter cameras, and sat in silence for a while. Threats didn't shake me anymore, but this wasn't about me. Somewhere in this neighborhood, innocent families had been destroyed by these false arrests. I'd read their files: a young teacher fired after a drug find in her trunk, a retired veteran whose property was seized after one anonymous tip. Emma and her partners had turned Mapleton Oaks into a machine, one that fed off fear and silence. The next morning, I attended the scheduled HOA meeting. Normally, it was a dull affair: budgets, garden complaints, pool repairs. But tonight, the room buzzed with tension. Emma sat at the head of the long wooden table, bandaged wrist resting on her clipboard. She looked fragile, but her eyes still burned with pride. The room hushed as I entered. "Mr. Miller," she said with forced politeness, "we didn't expect you to join us." "I'm a homeowner, aren't I?" I replied, taking a seat near the front. I figured I should hear what my HOA fees are funding. A few members exchanged nervous glances. Emma adjusted her glasses. "We're discussing community safety. Some residents have expressed concern about recent events." "Ah, I said you mean the part where your HOA planted cocaine in a resident's car." Gasps rippled through the room. Emma slammed her hand down. "That's a lie, is it?" I asked. I slid a photo onto the table, the still frame from the gate camera showing her hand reaching into my car. She froze. Her mouth opened, closed, then opened again. That's not fake, I finished for her. Because the timestamp says otherwise. And so does the patrol log showing Deputy Jackson's car delivering the package 2 minutes earlier. Her eyes darted wildly toward the other members. "You think you can destroy everything I built?" I leaned forward. "You did that yourself." For a full minute the room was silent, except for the whir of the ceiling fan. Then one board member, a gray-haired man, stood. "Emma, is it true?" She didn't answer. I gathered my folder and stood up. "This meeting is now under federal investigation. Every document, every transaction from your HOA accounts to your private group messages will be audited." As I turned to leave, Emma whispered behind me, almost too soft to hear, "You have no idea how deep this goes." I paused at the door. "You're right," I said, "but I'm about to find out." By the third day, the neighborhood had gone eerily quiet. No kids playing on the sidewalks, no dog walkers chatting under the oaks, just blinds half drawn and driveways swept spotless as if Mapleton Oaks itself were trying to erase its guilt. I'd seen that silence before. It was the sound of a community realizing its queen had cracks in her crown. At dawn, I drove past the HOA office, a small stucco building behind the tennis courts. The closed for maintenance sign hung crooked on the door, but a light glowed inside. Through the tinted glass, I caught a glimpse of Karen, Emma's closest ally, the HOA treasurer, hunched over a printer feeding in stacks of old invoices, probably erasing, rewriting, sanitizing. I parked 2 houses down, opened my laptop, and logged into the remote warrant system. Within minutes, my agents confirmed they'd intercepted outgoing data transfers from that very building, files renamed, compressed, and sent to an encrypted cloud. The attempt screamed panic. "Let them keep uploading," I told Agent Cole over the phone. "The more they try to hide, the more metadata we'll collect." By mid-morning, I paid a visit to a man named Henry Webb, one of the longest-standing residents. He lived at the edge of the cul-de-sac in a house, half hidden by magnolia trees. His lawn was immaculate, too immaculate, the kind that smelled of quiet fear. When I knocked, he opened the door only halfway. "You the one who embarrassed Emma?" he asked bluntly. "Depends on who's telling the story," I said. "Mind if I ask a few questions?" He hesitated, then let me in. The air inside smelled of old coffee and anxiety. Piles of letters sat unopened on his dining table, all stamped with the HOA's seal. "Those all fines?" I asked. "Every damn one of them," Henry muttered. "Started with a crack in my driveway. Then paint on the shutters. Then a noise complaint because my grandson played drums." He pointed to the newest letter, trembling slightly. "Last month they said they'd place a lien on my house if I didn't pay." "How much do they claim you owe?" $17,000. $17,000 more than a year's worth of dues. I leafed through a few envelopes. Each fine had been signed by Emma Johnson herself with identical handwriting and identical justifications. At the bottom of every notice was a new clause. "Failure to comply will result in community forfeiture proceedings under Section 12C. I looked at Henry. "Did they ever take anyone's property before?" He nodded grimly. "The Thompsons. Nice young couple moved here last year. HOA said they missed 2 payments. Sheriff's office seized their house a week later. They never came back." That name hit me. I'd seen it in one of the DEA files. Jamal and Nicole Thompson, both arrested on possession charges 2 months ago. The evidence bag in their case, same batch number as the one planted in my car. It all fit together now. "Henry," I said quietly, "what if I told you this isn't about paint or grass height, that the HOA's been running an illegal forfeiture racket?" He laughed bitterly. "Son, I've been saying that for years. No one listened." At noon, I met Agent Ortega behind the community pool neutral ground hidden from cameras. She handed me a tablet showing fresh data from the financial task force. "Here," she said. "Every fine over $2,000 was funneled through a maintenance subcontractor. But that company doesn't exist. Its bank account is controlled by someone named E.J. Holdings." "Emma Johnson," I said. "Exactly. But it gets worse. E.J. Holdings wired 30% of its income to another account registered to Deputy Raymond Jackson. So, that's how they split the profits HOA fines laundered as maintenance fees paid to a shell company kicked back to the deputy who provided the planted evidence. It was a full-circle machine, local corruption disguised as neighborhood discipline. Ortega lowered her voice. "We also found a pattern. Every seized property was resold within 3 weeks to the same real estate broker, and all sales closed through the same notary public. They were flipping confiscated homes for profit, My jaw tightened. And the families, they ruined. She looked away. Most have criminal records now. Hard to fight back when your name's already dirty. I stared at the rippling blue water of the pool. It looked pure on the surface, just like this neighborhood. But poison doesn't always float. Time to cut off their money supply, I said. Freeze all HOA accounts and notify the county registrar, no property transfers without federal clearance. Ortega nodded. And Emma? Not yet. I want her to sweat first. That evening, the HOA board held a special session. They thought I didn't know, but my team had already tapped the clubhouse cameras. The feed came through crystal clear, Emma sitting at the head of the table flanked by Karen and the HOA attorney Paul Whitmore. On the screen behind them was a spreadsheet of names, homeowners, addresses, payment statuses, and color-coded notes. At the top of the file, priority list, Q3. Each name had one of three tags: green equals compliant, yellow equals monitor, red equals problem. My name, of course, was highlighted in red. Next to it a note: new target. Handle soon. Use code 9 if necessary. Cole, watching beside me, raised an eyebrow. Code 9, I scrolled down. The legend read evidence placement with sheriff authorization. So there it was in writing their secret language for planting drugs. I switched the feed's audio to live mode. Emma's voice came sharp and controlled. The DEA's looking into us. I need everyone to destroy anything connecting us to Jackson's department. Karen, purge the financial logs. Paul, stall any subpoenas. The lawyer frowned. Emma, that's obstruction, she snapped. It's survival. Karen whispered nervously. What about Miller? He's dangerous. Emma's lips curled. Then we make him the villain. I'll say he's harassing me, that he threatened to shut down the HOA for personal gain. People will believe me, they always do. Her arrogance was almost impressive. Almost. I closed the laptop and leaned back. That's enough, I said. We've got everything we need. Cole grinned. You want me to get the warrants ready? Not yet, I said. Tomorrow morning we let her think she still runs this neighborhood. Tomorrow night we take it all. But Mapleton Oaks wasn't done showing its teeth. Around midnight my motion sensors triggered. I checked the exterior cameras, 2 figures in dark hoodies moving near my garage. They weren't amateurs. They avoided direct light, worked in pairs. I grabbed my sidearm and slipped out the back door. The humid air smelled of cut grass and gasoline. I moved quietly along the fence until I saw them near my car, one holding a crowbar, the other pouring something from a plastic jug. Gasoline. They were about to torch the car, destroy evidence, maybe scare me off. I raised my voice calm but firm. Step away from the vehicle. Both froze. One dropped the jug, the other spun toward me with a flashlight, and that's when I saw the patch on his sleeve, Mapleton Oaks Security. So Emma had sent her own guards. They panicked, bolting toward the alley, but before they could escape, 2 unmarked black SUVs roared around the corner, my backup team. Floodlights flared and the men hit the ground instantly. Cole stepped out, gun drawn, caught them red-handed director. Bag them, I said. We'll see what they know in the morning. As agents cuffed the intruders, I walked up to my car. The gasoline fumes stung my nose. On the windshield, smeared in red spray paint, were 3 words: stop digging now. I stared at the message for a long moment, then smiled coldly. Oh, I'm just getting started. Back inside, I cleaned my hands, poured a cup of black coffee, and sat at my desk. The neighborhood outside was quiet again, too quiet, like a snake coiled in grass. Tomorrow, Emma would wake up thinking she'd dodged another bullet. She'd call her lawyer draft another lie, maybe even smile for the local news. But by sundown, every secret she'd buried under Mapleton Oaks was going to surface. Because in this neighborhood, perfection was just the prettiest disguise for corruption. And I was done watching from behind the curtain. Sunrise crept over Mapleton Oaks like nothing had happened. The dew sparkled on the manicured lawns, the fountain at the entrance gurgled cheerfully, and the smell of fresh mulch covered up the stench of gasoline that had lingered from the night before. But the neighborhood didn't fool me anymore. Every perfect hedge was a hiding place. Every smiling neighbor was a potential accomplice. By 7 a.m., I was already in motion. My team had spent the night interrogating the 2 captured security guards. Both cracked faster than I expected. One of them, a man named Tyler Crane, admitted that Emma had paid them $2,000 each to scare the new guy off. They didn't know I was with the DEA. She had told them I was some journalist trying to expose her HOA. Cole handed me the written statements. They claimed she told them to torch your car, director. Said she'd handle the rest afterward. I nodded, sipping black coffee. That's attempted arson, witness tampering, and obstruction, and we'll get her on all 3. But we still need her money trail airtight. Already ahead of you, Cole said, sliding another folder across the table. We got a court order to unseal EJ Holdings' financial records. Guess who co-signed one of the accounts? I opened the file and frowned. Deputy Raymond Jackson. And here's the kicker, Cole continued. Jackson wired $50,000 to Emma's personal account 2 days before she planted the drugs in your car, labeled it as a consulting fee. I leaned back in my chair. Consulting for what corruption? At 9 a.m., we received another call, this time from the county courthouse clerk. The HOA's attorney, Paul Whitmore, had filed a civil complaint against me for slander, harassment, and property damage. I couldn't help but laugh. She's suing a federal agent while under investigation for felony obstruction, Cole smirked. Arrogant or desperate, both, I said. And desperation makes people sloppy. It was time to turn the game around. I drove back into Mapleton Oaks just as residents were leaving for work. They glanced nervously at my SUV but didn't speak. The news of my badge had spread fast, and fear was finally doing what fairness couldn't silence in gossip. Outside the HOA office, Emma's silver Lexus was already parked perfectly within the white lines, as always. Through the glass, I saw her pacing phone pressed to her ear, waving her free hand wildly. When I stepped inside, her expression froze. She hung up mid-sentence. "Robert," she said carefully, "this isn't a good time." "Oh, I think it's the perfect time," I replied, placing a folder on her desk. "You filed a lawsuit against a federal agency. You might want to withdraw that before it becomes Exhibit A in your criminal case." She stared at the folder, then back at me. "You can't scare me with paperwork. I know my rights." "I'm not here to scare you," I said evenly. "I'm here to offer you a choice, cooperation or destruction." Her jaw tightened. "Is that a threat?" "It's a fact," I said, opening the folder. Inside were photos, screenshots of the group chat, labeled Clean Streets Project bank transfers between EJ Holdings and Deputy Jackson, and stills from the HOA camera showing her hand dropping the cocaine bag into my car. She tried to keep her voice steady, but her eyes betrayed panic. Those pictures could be anything. Deepfakes, misunderstandings. I leaned forward. "Then explain this." I pulled out the latest report from the county treasurer, a list of seized properties with matching HOA fine numbers. "These homes were taken after your board issued fines, then conveniently resold to a broker who just happens to share your maiden name. Care to comment?" Her face went pale. "I'm giving you one chance," I continued. "Sign a written statement confirming Deputy Jackson's involvement. In return, I'll recommend leniency when this goes federal. Otherwise, you'll go down as the architect of a racketeering operation built on stolen evidence and destroyed lives." She didn't speak. For a long time, the only sound was the ticking of her desk clock. Finally, she whispered, "You don't understand what they'll do if I talk." "They," I repeated. She looked up, eyes wide like a trapped animal. "You think this started with me?" Jackson answers to people far above me. Developers, investors, even county officials. We just played our part. Now I understood. Emma wasn't the queen. She was a pawn who'd been allowed to wear a crown. "Then you'd better start naming names," I said quietly. "Because pawns get sacrificed first." By the time I left, Emma was trembling, her hands clenched around the pen I'd given her. She hadn't signed yet, but I knew she would. Fear is a better motivator than pride. I drove straight to the sheriff's department. The receptionist nearly dropped her coffee when I flashed my badge and asked for Deputy Raymond Jackson. He came out 5 minutes later, all smiles and swagger. "Director Miller didn't expect to see you so soon." "What can I do for you?" "Just a quick chat," I said, "about community partnerships." We stepped into an interview room. I closed the door, set a small recorder on the table, and said casually, "You know Emma Johnson pretty well, don't you?" He laughed nervously. "Sure, she's a firecracker. Runs that HOA like a general." "Yeah, and apparently she's quite generous too." I slid the printed wire transfer toward him. $50,000 from your account." "Care to explain?" His smile vanished. That's a loan." "To a suburban HOA president," I asked. "You must really believe in community service." He tried to stand, but I raised my hand. "Sit down, deputy. We both know what's going on here. The planted drugs, the false seizures, the kickbacks from property, resales, it all points back to you." Beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. "You can't prove." "Actually," I said calmly, "we can, and we will." The room fell silent except for the hum of the air vent. Jackson stared at the transfer sheet like it might change if he looked hard enough. Then finally, he exhaled. "I didn't start it," he muttered. "It was already running when I joined. The county prosecutor, the construction investors, they all take a cut. Emma's just the face they use for the dirty work." Names, I said. He hesitated. Or 20 years, I added. That did it. Jackson began talking fast, nervous, almost relieved. He listed contractors, lawyers, even a bank manager. It was bigger than I'd guessed, an entire web of suburban HOAs used as laundering fronts for stolen drug evidence. When he finished, I pressed stop on the recorder. Congratulations, Deputy. You just became my star witness. By afternoon, we were ready. Cole coordinated with the U.S. Attorney's Office. Ortega prepped search warrants for every property Jackson named. At 6 p.m., the sun dipped low, and Mapleton Oaks prepared for its most important inspection yet. 6 unmarked vehicles rolled in quietly, lights off, tires whispering over the asphalt. One by one, agents took positions at Emma's house, the HOA office, and the storage unit she rented under a false name. I watched from the command SUV headset, crackling with updates. Team 1 in position. Team 2 ready. Team 3, breach. The sound of doors crashing echoed faintly in the distance. Within minutes, evidence boxes, cash ledgers, and unregistered cell phones began piling up in the vans. Cole's voice came through. Director, we've got something. What is it? A safe behind a false wall in her garage. We're opening it now. 30 seconds later, I heard the click of metal and Cole's stunned whisper. Sir, you're going to want to see this. Inside the safe were dozens of plastic evidence bags, all stamped with federal inventory numbers, the same series as the one Emma planted. But these weren't empty. Each contained carefully preserved packets of cocaine, heroin, and fentanyl, proof that stolen federal evidence had been circulating for years. Emma had just turned her suburban paradise into a federal crime scene. As the agents logged the items, I stood outside her house, the wind carrying the faint sound of a lawnmower somewhere down the street. Ordinary life continued, pretending not to notice. When Emma was led out in handcuffs, her eyes met mine for the last time. No more defiance, no more speeches about community standards. Just quiet resignation, and maybe buried deep beneath relief that it was finally over. But as I watched the black SUVs disappear into the dusk, a single thought chilled me. If Jackson was right, this wasn't just Mapleton Oaks. It was one HOA out of many. And somewhere out there, more neighborhoods just like this one were still running silent, polished, and perfectly corrupt. The morning after the raid, Mapleton Oaks was no longer the picture of suburban serenity. Yellow tape fluttered across the HOA office, federal agents moved in and out with sealed boxes, and news vans clogged the front gate. The same neighbors who once gossiped about my mailbox color now peeked nervously from behind curtains, realizing the perfect little paradise they'd built their lives around was rotten to the core. As I stepped out of my house, a microphone was shoved in my face. Director Miller, is it true that the HOA was part of a larger trafficking ring? Did the president really plant drugs in your car? Was this neighborhood under DEA surveillance from the start? I kept my expression neutral. Ongoing investigation. No comment. But deep down, I already knew the answer: yes. And this wasn't the end, it was the beginning. Inside the command van, Agent Cole was sorting through the evidence. Dozens of photos, bank records, and coded ledgers now covered the table. We've confirmed your theory, he said grimly. The stolen narcotics trace back to federal seizure batches, not just from Mississippi, but from 3 other states. Whoever's behind this has access at the distribution level. I rubbed my temples, meaning someone in law enforcement or the courts. Exactly, Cole said. We're dealing with a full-blown network. He handed me another folder, this one thicker than the rest. Financial analysis shows transfers from Emma's EJ Holdings to a company called Stonebrook Management Group, headquartered in Baton Rouge. They handle property management for at least 12 other HOA communities across the South. I frowned. So Mapleton Oaks was just one branch. Cole nodded. And here's the twist. Every one of those HOAs reported abnormally high maintenance fines in the past 2 years. Same pattern, same numbers, same language in the letters. That was when it hit me. This wasn't local corruption. This was an organized pipeline using neighborhood associations to launder drug money through fake fines, property seizures, and renovation projects. Around noon, I met with the federal prosecutor, Laura Gaines, at the district office downtown. She was tough, sharp, and already 3 steps ahead of most bureaucrats. You've got enough to file racketeering charges, she said, scanning through the evidence photos. But if you want to take down Stonebrook, you'll need to trace the money beyond state lines. We're talking interstate conspiracy. That's FBI and DOJ territory. I'm not letting this vanish into red tape, I said. Then we'll do it smart, she replied. We'll make Mapleton Oaks the test case, the proof that the pattern exists. Once the indictments hit, others will follow. She leaned back, watching me closely. Robert, I've seen your kind of determination before. Just remember, once you go after the people funding this, you're not dealing with petty HOA queens anymore. You're dealing with men in suits who can crush careers. I smiled faintly. Good thing mine's already bulletproof. By evening, the storm had reached the airwaves. Every news station, from Jackson to New Orleans, ran the same headline: DEA uncovers massive HOA drug laundering ring. Commentators debated whether suburban boards had become mini-governments abusing unchecked power. One headline screamed, "The HOA from hell how a neighborhood tried to frame a federal agent." In less than 24 hours, Mapleton Oaks went from pristine suburb to national scandal. I watched the coverage quietly from my living room. My coffee had gone cold, but my mind raced. Because amid all the noise, one small detail from Cole's report kept nagging me: a single payment, $1.2 million wired from Stonebrook Management to a shell company registered in D.C. under the name Fairmont Consulting Group. That name rang a bell. I opened an old database, the DEA's internal audit log. Fairmont Consulting had been awarded a federal subcontract 3 years ago providing evidence storage security systems, which meant the same company responsible for protecting seized narcotics was also laundering the money made from selling them. I felt my pulse quicken. "They're using government contracts to hide it," I whispered. Before I could dig deeper, my phone buzzed a restricted number. "Director Miller," a calm, low voice said. "You've been busy." Who is this? Someone who prefers the system to stay undisturbed. "You've done enough. Walk away and you'll retire comfortably. Keep going and you won't make it to next week." The line clicked dead. I stared at the silent phone jaw tightening. Threats again, but this one felt different, calculated, cold. The next morning I received a visitor. A young woman stood on my porch, mid-20s, dark blazer, nervous eyes. "Mr. Miller, I used to work for Fairmont Consulting," she said softly. "My name's Rachel Pierce. I need to talk." I ushered her inside, poured her coffee, and let her speak. Her voice trembled at first, then steadied as the words poured out. "They made me falsify audits," she said. "Fairmont's evidence systems weren't designed to secure narcotics, they were designed to track them. Every time drugs were logged for destruction, the system diverted a small portion back into private storage. They called it overflow retention." "How long has this been happening?" "Years," she whispered. "They rotate shipments between regional facilities, so no one notices shortages. And the distribution happens through community safety partnerships like Mapleton Oaks. So the HOA fines were just the front. Yes, each neighborhood gets funding for security improvements, but the money comes from selling confiscated narcotics back onto the street through trusted intermediaries, sheriffs, county clerks, local boards." She looked at me desperately. "I didn't know who else to trust. I saw your story on the news. I know you're not like them." I handed her a card. "You just became our key witness, but you'll need protection." Her eyes widened. "Will they come after me? They already tried to kill me," I said quietly. "You're not alone." That night I called Cole. "We're going bigger," I told him. "This isn't just HOA corruption, it's federal-level embezzlement. Get the DC cyber team ready. We're pulling Fairmont servers." He hesitated. "That'll light up half of Washington, sir." "Then, let it burn," I said. Within hours we executed a sealed warrant. By 3 a.m., our agents were inside Fairmont's corporate offices, copying drives and photographing records. The deeper they dug, the uglier it got encrypted, ledgers listing dozens of county sheriffs, judges, and contractors receiving monthly retainers. At the top of the hierarchy sat a single code name, Project Whitehall. Under it, primary distributor Stonebrook Management Group operational cells, 12 HOA networks across 4 states, federal liaison redacted. That last line made my blood run cold. There was someone inside the government protecting this operation. Cole stared at the screen. "If that's real, sir, we're not just fighting corruption, we're fighting the system itself. Then we'll expose it," I said. "Every name, every dollar." By dawn, the retaliation began. My power flickered twice, then died. When I checked the circuit box, the entire line had been cut clean through. Minutes later, my home alarm triggered front door sensor disabled. I drew my gun and moved silently through the hallway. A shadow shifted outside the window, then a loud crack. The window shattered glass, spraying across the floor. I ducked behind the couch, heart pounding. Through the jagged hole, I saw the muzzle flash. Someone was firing from the trees across the street. 3 shots, then silence. Tires screeched, and a black sedan disappeared into the dawn fog. Cole's voice came through the radio seconds later. "Director, we're on our way." "Are you hit?" "I'm fine," I said, breathing hard. "But they just confirmed it. We're getting close." When the agents arrived, I stepped outside, watching the sunlight crawl across the empty street. Mapleton Oaks was quiet again. Too quiet. The birds hadn't even returned yet. For a moment, I thought about Emma, how it all began with a fake bag of cocaine and one arrogant accusation. Now that single act had unraveled an empire. But I knew this was far from over. Because somewhere beyond this street, the people who built Project Whitehall were watching and planning their next move. And if they thought a little gunfire would stop me, they didn't understand who they were dealing with. The rain came down hard that night, a slow, relentless drumming against the roof that seemed to echo the unease, settling deep in my bones. Mapleton Oaks slept under gray clouds, unaware that the neighborhood's quiet scandal had now ignited a storm that reached all the way to Washington. I hadn't slept in 36 hours. My living room had become a war room, maps, charts, and photos covering every inch of wall space. Red strings connected everything: Emma Johnson, Deputy Jackson, the Stonebrook accounts, Fairmont Consulting, and finally that single ominous name at the top of it all, Project Whitehall. Agent Cole entered quietly, holding 2 coffees. He looked tired but alert. "Sir D.C. confirmed your suspicion," he said, placing a folder on the table. Fairmont's primary contract was authorized by the Department of Justice's Asset Forfeiture Division. I frowned. "You're saying this operation wasn't just overlooked? It was funded," Cole nodded grimly. "And the signatory for the authorization was a man named Harold Westfield." The name hit me like ice water. Westfield, former DEA deputy administrator. My old mentor. The man who had once told me, "Justice doesn't die in the dark, Robert. It dies when the people who see the light look away." I stared at the folder. "He taught me half of what I know." "Then he's teaching you the other half now," Cole said quietly. "The part where corruption wears a federal badge." By morning, we were airborne in unmarked Gulfstream, bound for D.C., carrying digital backups of every file Rachel Pierce had helped us decrypt. She sat 2 rows behind me, pale but resolute. She hadn't said a word since boarding, clutching her laptop like a life vest. Halfway through the flight, turbulence shook the cabin. My phone buzzed an encrypted message from an unknown number: "Stop the leak, or you won't land." I glanced toward the cockpit. The pilot looked calm, unaware. I leaned forward. "Cole, get eyes on the flight path." "Right now." He pulled up the radar feed. "Everything looks normal." Then he froze. "Wait, one of our transponders just dropped offline." "Engine malfunction?" I asked. "No. It was turned off remotely." I unbuckled, moved to the cockpit, and looked out through the rain-streaked glass. In the distance, a small jet trailed us, unmarked lights off. Cole's voice crackled through the headset. "Sir, they're closing in." I turned to the pilot. "Change course to Richmond." "Now." He nodded and began descent. The pursuing aircraft banked sharply, then vanished into cloud cover. When we touched down, local FBI agents met us at the hangar. "Director Miller, we've been tracking that tail since you left Mississippi," one said. "Whoever they are, they're using federal-grade encryption." Of course they were. The message had been clear: "You're getting too close to Whitehall." That evening, we relocated to a secure safe house in Arlington. Rachel uploaded the last encrypted folder from Fairmont's servers. It took nearly 2 hours to decrypt. When the final file opened, the room went dead silent. It wasn't just ledgers or transaction logs this time. It was a presentation, an internal briefing titled Whitehall Initiative, Phase 4 Implementation. The document detailed everything: partnership between private property associations, HOAs, and regional law enforcement, revenue stream optimization through civil forfeiture integration, asset cycling via controlled narcotics redistribution under forfeiture-exempt supply chain. In plain language, they were stealing federal drug evidence, planting it, arresting innocent people, seizing property, then reselling it legally. Cole muttered, "This isn't corruption, this is policy." Rachel looked sick. They called it recycling. At the end of the file was the authorization signature: Deputy Administrator Harold Westfield, and below it my own name. Operational Oversight Director Robert Miller, DEA. My stomach dropped. "They forged it," I said quietly. Rachel nodded. "The metadata confirms your digital credentials were cloned through Fairmont's secure login. They've been using your name to approve shipments for months." Cole's jaw clenched. "They framed you before you even showed up at Mapleton Oaks." The realization hit like a physical blow. The drugs Emma planted in my car hadn't been random. They were deliberately linked to my ID so that if anything went wrong, I'd take the fall. They'd tried to burn me before I even knew I was part of their system. By dawn, we had enough evidence to shake the Justice Department to its foundation. but we needed a way to bring it public without it being buried under internal review. I made the call to an old contact, Senator Evelyn Ross, chair of the Senate Oversight Committee. She picked up on the second ring. "Robert, I heard about Mapleton Oaks. You stirred quite the hornet's nest." "I need a hearing," I said. "Closed session. I'm bringing proof of federal-level criminal conspiracy. Who's implicated? Too many to count." There was a pause. Then her voice hardened. "You'll have it by Friday, but you'd better be ready once this starts. It won't stop until someone's career ends." "I'm counting on it," I said. 2 days later, we walked into the Capitol through the service entrance. Rachel Cole and I carried 3 hard drives, each one containing thousands of pages of evidence. The committee room was dimly lit, soundproofed, and already tense. Senator Ross sat at the center, flanked by aides. Across from her were 5 men in tailored suits, Department of Justice officials, their faces unreadable. Ross began, "Director Miller, the committee is prepared to hear your testimony regarding alleged misconduct in the federal asset forfeiture program." I placed the first drive on the table. "Misconduct is too gentle a word, Senator. What I'm presenting today is the blueprint of an empire built on stolen justice, an operation called Project Whitehall." For the next 40 minutes, I laid it all out: the drug evidence thefts, the HOA laundering rings, the false arrests, the connections to Fairmont Stonebrook, and the DOJ authorizations signed by Westfield. I showed transaction flows, intercepted emails, even a photo of the safe in Emma's garage, proof of the stolen evidence stockpile. The officials across the table shifted uneasily. One whispered to another. Another clenched his jaw. When I finished, Ross folded her hands. "And you're certain these records are authentic? Every file verified by 3 forensic analysts," I said, "including timestamps showing federal access points." She turned to the DOJ counsel. "Mr. Westfield, would you like to respond?" Every head turned. I hadn't even noticed him enter. Harold Westfield sat at the end of the table, calm, confident, the same man who once called me his protege. "Director Miller," he said smoothly, "you've clearly put together quite a story. Unfortunately, it's based on incomplete data. Project Whitehall was an internal audit code name, not a criminal enterprise. And those signatures," he smiled faintly, "fabrications, likely by rogue contractors." "Then you won't mind forensic review," Ross said sharply. Westfield hesitated. "If this goes public, you'll destabilize multiple ongoing prosecutions. You'll destroy careers." Ross's gaze didn't waver. "Then let them burn." The room erupted, shouts, papers, slamming aides, whispering. I met Westfield's eyes. For the first time, his mask cracked. He knew the walls were closing in. That night after the session, I walked alone through the rain-slick streets of D.C. The Capitol dome glowed faintly through the fog, a symbol of justice that looked fragile, now hollow. Cole called me from the safe house. "You did it, sir. The committee's launching a full investigation. Westfield's office is locked down." "Good," I said quietly. "But this isn't victory. Not yet." "Why not?" "Because systems like this don't vanish overnight. They regroup. They rename themselves. They hide behind new contracts and new faces." I stopped at the edge of the reflecting pool. My reflection stared back, older, harder, carrying the weight of every innocent person ruined by the machine we'd exposed. Rachel's voice came faintly over the line. "Then what happens next?" I looked at the Capitol's reflection shimmering on the water. "We finish it," I said, "all the way to the top." The rain fell harder, washing the city lights into long streaks of gold. Somewhere inside that maze of marble buildings, the architects of Whitehall were already planning their counterattack. But I wasn't 16 anymore, falsely accused and humiliated like in my youth. I was the director now, and this time justice wasn't knocking politely. It was coming with a warrant. The rain had barely stopped when the real storm began. 2 days after the Senate hearing, headlines exploded across the nation. Whitehall exposed: DEA director accuses DOJ of laundering stolen narcotics. Government scandal tied to HOA corruption network. Is the justice system eating itself? Talk shows buzzed with speculation, pundits debated my sanity, and federal agencies went into damage control. But inside the halls of power, silence ruled, the kind of silence that meant phones were ringing behind closed doors, favors were being traded, and careers were being quietly erased. I didn't have time to celebrate. The moment my face hit the evening news, I'd become both hero and target. Cole burst into the safe house at 6 a.m., a folder clutched in his hand. "Sir, you need to see this," he said breathlessly. He spread the papers across the table, printed transcripts of intercepted internal communications. "These are from DOJ's internal servers. Someone's running cleanup operations under the codename Echo Phase. They're deleting files tied to Whitehall, closing bank accounts, transferring assets offshore. Who authorized it, I asked. He hesitated. Acting Attorney General Caldwell. My pulse quickened. Caldwell had replaced Westfield's oversight division just 48 hours ago, supposedly to restore integrity. Now he was scrubbing the evidence. They're not trying to fix it, I muttered. They're burying it. Cole's voice hardened. So what's our move? I looked up from the papers. We go louder. We go public before they can rewrite history. At 9 a.m., I walked into the headquarters of the Sentinel, a major investigative outlet. The editor, a silver-haired woman named Maya Lang, was waiting with her team. She'd covered everything from cartel busts to political leaks, but this story made even her pale. Robert, she said, gesturing toward the conference room, if half of what you're alleging is true, this could dismantle the entire forfeiture system. That's exactly why they'll try to silence it, I replied. So I need redundancy. If something happens to me, the data gets out anyway. I slid her 3 encrypted drives. Each one holds every transaction, every message, every photo. Publish them only if I disappear. She stared at me for a long moment. You're expecting trouble. I'm expecting efficiency, I said dryly. Back at headquarters, Rachel Pierce was poring over new files with Agent Ortega. She looked exhausted, sleepless nights, too much caffeine, and the constant awareness that every shadow could be danger. We traced the offshore transfers, she said as I entered. They're using intermediary shell firms in the Cayman Islands, Singapore, and Zurich. But the routing pattern is weird. All of them converge on a single account in Geneva under the name Novus Investments. Cole leaned in. Guess who the account holder is? I didn't need to guess. Westfield. Rachel nodded. Except there's more. The account was created 18 years ago, long before any of this started. That means Whitehall wasn't a reaction to corruption. It was designed from day one. I rubbed my temple, a blueprint masquerading as oversight. Then Rachel hesitated, voice low. There's something else you should know, sir. She turned her laptop around. On the screen was a personnel file, my own. Someone's altered your employment record, she said quietly. According to DOJ archives, you were suspended 6 months ago for misconduct. The reinstatement order that put you back in office doesn't exist. I stared at the screen, cold realization crawling through me. They're rewriting me out of the system. Cole cursed under his breath. They're setting you up to take the fall for everything. That night we relocated again, this time to an abandoned communications facility 20 miles outside D.C. The less traceable we were, the better. Rain lashed the windows as thunder rumbled over the forest. Inside, fluorescent lights flickered across walls lined with screens. Rachel typed furiously, decrypting Fairmont's archived emails. Suddenly, one of the monitors pinged. Got something, she said. It's a video file. Timestamp 3 years ago. Encrypted under Fairmont's security division. She pressed play. The footage was grainy, but clear enough to make my stomach twist. Harold Westfield sat at a table with 2 other men, one of them wearing a DOJ badge, the other in a corporate suit. Westfield's voice was calm, confident. Gentlemen, we're not stealing, we're reallocating. The narcotics are already seized, worthless, sitting in storage. We convert them, we fund enforcement initiatives, and no taxpayer ever sees the bill. The suited man laughed. So long as nobody asks where the reallocated stock ends up. Westfield smiled. That's what our community partnerships are for. Neighborhood organizations make perfect distribution vectors. Clean paperwork, trusted faces. Then came the line that made the room fall silent. If anyone finds out, Westfield said, we'll have our scapegoat. Someone high enough to take the fall, but idealistic enough to never suspect until it's too late. The video froze Westfield's smile hanging like a knife. Rachel whispered, they meant you. I felt a strange calm settle over me. Then it's poetic, I said. The scapegoat gets to write the ending. At dawn, we prepared the counterstrike. Cole had assembled a small, loyal team of agents, people we trusted absolutely. Our plan was simple: release the Fairmont footage, the Geneva account logs, and every document proving DOJ involvement directly to the Senate oversight servers, bypassing the Justice Department entirely. But as the uploads began, alarms triggered across our network. Rachel's eyes widened. They've found us. Static filled the monitors. One by one, our connections died. The backup generator kicked in just as headlights appeared outside the building. Unmarked SUVs blacked out, moving fast. Contact east approach, Ortega shouted. Cole grabbed his weapon, took position near the entrance. Rachel hit enter on her keyboard. Uploading partial package to external mirrors now. Gunfire shattered the front windows. The first round tore through the metal frame, followed by 3 more. Move, move, Cole yelled. I grabbed Rachel by the arm, dragging her behind cover. The upload bar crawled painfully, 63%, 71%, 82%. Another explosion rocked the side door. Tear gas filled the corridor. Cole fired back, covering us. They're trying to take it intact. I coughed through the smoke. They want the drives, Rachel screamed. 95%. A final burst of light filled the room, a flashbang. My ears rang, vision swimming. When I blinked the haze away, the monitors had gone dark. Cole pulled me toward the back exit. Upload finished. Let's go. We ran into the storm headlights cutting through the trees behind us. Rachel clutched the final backup drive to her chest. If they stop us now, at least the data's live. It's out there. Where did you send it? I shouted over the wind. Every major press server in the country. Encrypted release auto-decrypts in 12 hours, Cole grinned grimly. Then the world's about to know everything. We reached the highway as dawn broke, sirens fading behind us. The Capitol skyline glimmering faintly ahead through the mist. Rachel's phone buzzed. A single text appeared from an unknown number. You won't make it to 12 hours. She swallowed hard. They're not done yet. I looked at her, then out at the horizon. Neither are we. I knew once the files hit, the press chaos would erupt. Resignations, hearings, maybe even riots. But that was the price of truth. The system that tried to frame me, that used people like Emma Johnson as pawns, was about to crumble under its own weight. And this time, there would be no place left for its architects to hide, not behind HOA boards, not behind corporate contracts, not even behind federal seals. Because the moment the clock struck 12, Whitehall would no longer be a secret. And for the first time in years, justice wouldn't just knock, it would kick the damn door open. The sky over Washington was still gray when the world began to turn upside down. At precisely 6:00 a.m., 12 hours after Rachel's upload had gone live, the encrypted files from Fairmont Consulting began unlocking across global servers. Within minutes, news outlets, independent journalists, and government watchdogs had access to everything: the ledgers, the offshore transfers, the video of Westfield himself. The name Project Whitehall spread through headlines like wildfire. By 6:05 number, Whitehall Gate was trending worldwide. By 6:10, the Justice Department's website went offline for maintenance. By 6:03, regional directors had resigned. And by 7:00, there were unmarked cars tailing me again. Cole drove the SUV through the morning traffic eyes, scanning the mirrors. They're not even trying to hide anymore, he muttered. That black Yukon's been behind us for 6 blocks. Keep steady, I said, loading a fresh magazine into my sidearm. If they wanted to kill us, they would have done it last night. They're waiting for orders. Rachel sat in the back seat, clutching her laptop. The exhaustion on her face had hardened into resolve. They're losing control, she said quietly. Westfield's statements are all over the networks. He's denying everything, calling the footage deepfakes. But the metadata we embedded proves it's real, Cole snorted. He can call it whatever he wants. The Senate already called an emergency session, and Ross, I asked. She's ready for war, he replied. She wants you in front of the cameras at 10. Good, I said. Let's end it where everyone can see. We arrived at the Capitol under tight security. The plaza was surrounded by reporters, protesters, and a line of black SUVs from various agencies. You could feel the tension in the air, not just fear, but outrage. People wanted answers. Inside, Senator Evelyn Ross was waiting for us in a restricted conference room. You've started a political earthquake, Robert, she said without preamble. The president's chief of staff just called me personally. They're terrified. They should be, I replied. Whitehall wasn't just a rogue program. It's an infection that's been growing for years. She nodded. We'll hold a press briefing at 10 sharp. You'll speak first, then me. But understand this, once you go in front of those cameras, there's no coming back. You'll be the face of the storm. I gave a small, grim smile. Better than being its scapegoat. At 9:30, the final confirmation came, and the Senate Oversight Committee had issued formal subpoenas to the Department of Justice, Fairmont Consulting, and Stonebrook Management Group. Westfield himself had been placed on administrative leave, though we all knew what that really meant. He was running. Cole checked his earpiece. We've got unconfirmed reports of a private jet leaving Dulles under his alias. Destination unknown. Let him run, I said. The truth travels faster. 10 o'clock. The briefing room was packed wall to wall, journalists, cameras, flashes. The air buzzed with a mix of adrenaline and disbelief. Senator Ross stood at the podium. Her voice, calm yet sharp, cut through the noise. This morning, the United States Senate was presented with evidence of a multi-billion-dollar criminal enterprise operating within our own government. The operation, codenamed Project Whitehall, exploited the federal asset forfeiture program to launder narcotics and property seizures through private neighborhood associations across multiple states. The investigation began with one-man DEA Director Robert Miller, who refused to be silenced. She stepped aside and gestured for me to approach. The room exploded with flashes. I took a slow breath, the microphone picking up the sound of it. 3 months ago, I moved into a quiet suburban neighborhood called Mapleton Oaks. I thought I was just another homeowner. I was wrong. The audience listened in stunned silence as I walked them through everything: Emma Johnson's planted cocaine, the fake fines, the hidden safe, the connection to Fairmont and Stonebrook, the offshore accounts, and finally the video. Every word felt heavier than the last, but with each sentence the fog lifted a little more. I stand here today not as an official defending his agency, I said finally, but as a citizen demanding that justice be more than a slogan. Because if our own system can weaponize the law to steal from the innocent, then no one in this country is truly safe. For a moment there was absolute silence. Then applause, hesitant at first, then swelling until it filled the room. But amidst the noise my earpiece buzzed. Cole's voice came through low and urgent. "Director, we've got a problem. Rachel's signal just dropped. She was supposed to meet the FBI liaison at the west entrance. She never arrived." My chest tightened. "Trace her GPS." "Already did," he said. Last ping was 3 blocks away, near Constitution Avenue. I left the building immediately, ignoring reporters shouting my name. Cole met me at the curb, jumping into the SUV. We sped through the traffic weaving between cars until we reached an underground parking structure. The place was nearly empty, echoes of footsteps and distant sirens. Then, near the exit ramp, we saw it, Rachel's laptop shattered on the concrete. Her phone lay beside it, screen crack still recording. Cole picked it up. "It's still on video mode." He pressed play. The footage was shaky, Rachel walking fast, breath heavy, then stopping as 2 men in suits approached. One of them spoke calm and chillingly polite. "Miss Pierce, you've done enough damage. Come with us and no one else gets hurt." She turned the camera toward him for a split second. The image froze on his face, a clean-cut man in his 40s, badge flashing under his coat. Then the video cut to black. Cole's jaw tightened. "That's Caldwell's security chief." I exhaled slowly. "They took her to stop the chain reaction." He frowned. "But the files are already out." "Not all of them," I said. Rachel was decrypting the Geneva account, the one linking Whitehall's profits directly to the DOJ's slush fund. If they get that drive, they'll erase everything before it hits the servers. I turned toward him. "We're getting her back." By evening, the city was in chaos. Protests erupted outside the Justice Department, federal buildings went into lockdown, and unmarked vehicles darted through intersections like nervous insects. We traced the GPS signal from Rachel's phone to an industrial warehouse near the Potomac, officially listed as a forfeiture storage site. Cole checked his weapon. "That's poetic. Let's finish it," I said. We entered through the side-loading dock, moving quietly through the shadows. Inside, rows of crates stretched to the ceiling, each marked property of DOJ Evidence Division. At the far end of the hall, a small office glowed with light. Through the window, I saw Rachel tied to a chair guarded by 2 men. And standing over her was Caldwell himself. He was calm, methodical, dressed in a perfectly pressed suit. "I warned you people," he said, his voice echoing faintly through the glass. "Transparency is chaos. The public doesn't want truth. They want the illusion of control." Rachel spat back. "You stole that control years ago." He smiled. "That's why we're erasing you." Before he could move another inch, I kicked open the door. "Step away from her," I said, gun raised. Caldwell turned slowly, unfazed. "Director Miller, you're out of your jurisdiction." "I'm exactly where I belong," I said, "cleaning up what you built." His guards moved first. 2 quick shots echoed. Cole dropped one, I clipped the other. The warehouse filled with smoke and shouting. Rachel ducked behind the desk as I fired again, glass shattering around us. Caldwell bolted for the rear exit, briefcase in hand. Cole chased after him, but the man was fast, faster than I expected. By the time we reached the door, he was gone into the river fog. Rachel coughed, clutching the recovered drive. "It's all here," she gasped. "The Geneva transfers, the signatures, everything." I helped her to her feet. "Then let's make sure it never disappears again." That night, under heavy escort, we uploaded the final drive to multiple independent archives. Every outlet, every oversight server, every encrypted public mirror. The last missing link of Whitehall was finally out of reach of those who tried to bury it. When it was done, Rachel leaned back in her chair, tears glinting under the computer's blue light. "It's over," she whispered. I shook my head. No, it's begun. Because exposing corruption doesn't destroy it. It just drags it into the light, and light has a way of showing how much darkness still remains. Outside, the Capitol dome shone faintly through the fog, scarred but still standing. And as the sun rose over Washington, I realized something simple but terrifying. Whitehall wasn't a building or a project or even a conspiracy. It was a habit. And breaking it would take far more than one man, one neighborhood, or one victory. But it would start here now with the truth finally free.